Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So, folks, in my previous episode that I released, there was a comment or two that came up about a recent episode that was released from another podcast, not a Detroit Lions podcast, but another podcast all the same. And it was a podcast that I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take the time. I'm going to go and I'm going to watch it, which I watched the episode. It was about 14, 15 minutes all in length. And I'm going to tell you this right now. It's definitely something. And not in a good way. It's something in a bad way, because I've talked about other NFL insiders before about how, you know, they will talk about certain things, and it's like, dude, I don't know where this person decided to make their opinion from. I don't know what information they got. I don't know why they're saying what they're saying, but most of it just sounds like crap. Definitely the case with this one, as NFL insider Adam Kaplan came on to this podcast and was asked the question of, does he think the Lions can surpass or match the Philadelphia Eagles from last year? And I sat and I listened to this podcast, and let me tell you something. I don't know how this guy's an NFL insider. I don't know how this guy can be considered a guy that knows a whole lot about football, because it just seemed like every time this guy opened his mouth, it was like more and more crap just spewed out. It was like he had literal diarrhea of the mouth and constipation of the brain. It was just like, dude, I don't know why you're saying what you're saying, but nothing you're saying makes absolutely any damn sense. So what exactly did he say? Well, number one, he addressed a couple of different things. He addressed our offensive line. He addressed the whole situation with Ben Johnson and Kelvin Shepard. He addressed the situation with Ben Johnson and Jared Goff. He also addressed how apparently the Lions need help at edge rusher, which I do think to a certain extent he's correct about, but I think he's overblowing that quite a bit. And then number two, he also decided to say how because Ben Johnson is gone, our offense is not going to be as good because of the fact that John Morton is not Ben Johnson. So I was like, okay, there's a hell of a lot to talk about, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about this. And again, like I do, I'm going to break this down point by point by point, and hopefully, you know, by the end of it, I will have made more sense than this, you know, person did. So let's talk about the first and foremost thing that he goes on about, which is obviously, in my opinion, the coordinators. Because he talks about Kelvin Shepard primarily, and then he moves over to John Morton and the whole situation with Ben Johnson. And what Adam Caplan specifically stated was that, in his opinion, he does not think that Kelvin Shepard is going to be as good or is not going to be able to make the defense where it was last year under Aaron Glenn's tutelage. Which, okay, I can understand why, to a certain extent, you know, he would have that thought process. I can understand to a certain extent why he would think that. But just by saying that, he's already opened himself to a number of criticisms that are showing how indeed wrong he is. First and foremost here, as I've said before in the past, even though Kelvin Shepard, as far as his overall coaching experience, is not that much, it really isn't. This is only his 5th year coaching. We have to understand something here. This is a guy that for the last 2 years, according to both Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell, has been directly being tutored and mentored to take over the role as a defensive coordinator. They both said that this guy was calling the plays on the sideline before Aaron Glenn would actually call the plays in. So he already knew exactly what Aaron Glenn was going to do before Aaron Glenn did it. So it's like, okay, this has been going on for the last 2 years. That's 2 years of mentorship, coaching, and tutelage, and where this guy's been getting ready to take over for the job. So that's number one problem. Number two problem. Like I said, yes, he is correct that Kelvin Shepard has not had a whole lot of experience coaching, but neither was Aaron Glenn when he came into the role either. Aaron Glenn was a coach for 7 years prior to Dan Campbell naming him the defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. 7 years. Kelvin Shepard has been a coach 4 years before now being named the defense coordinator in his 5th year. So realistically, between the two coaches of Aaron Glenn and Kelvin Shepard, there's a 3-year difference. Realistically, that's not going to make a whole hell of a lot of difference. It's not. Because it's like, listen, both of these guys, when they were assigned the role of the defense coordinator, they had primarily been position coaches. Aaron Glenn was primarily the defensive backs coach with the New Orleans Saints. Kelvin Shepard has primarily been the linebackers coach with the Detroit Lions. But here's the thing. When Aaron Glenn was being named the defense coordinator, he was coming into a brand new situation, building a brand new culture, all that nonsense, interacting with new players. Kelvin Shepard has been there for the last 4 years. He knows the players. He knows the cultures. The players know him. The players know what to expect from him, and he knows what to expect from the players. So that already puts Kelvin Shepard in an immense position forward compared to where Aaron Glenn was. Plus, on top of that, the talent that Kelvin Shepard has is immensely, 100% night and day better than what Aaron Glenn had to start with. No doubt about that. So, for me, it's like that right there is not going to do a whole lot of damage or is going to make a difference like what, Kaplan's trying to say. Now, the only difference primarily between Shepard and Glenn as far as experience, what they do have, is playing experience. As we both know, they were both NFL players. Aaron Glenn was a player for 15 years in the NFL. Kelvin Shepard was only a player for 8. So yes, Glenn definitely had more experience there. But we're talking about coaching. We're not talking about playing. And again, the playing experience is still going to apply here all the same. Now, there's that. Now let's talk about the whole situation with Ben Johnson and John Morton. Again, according to Adam Caplan, he states that John Morton and Ben Johnson are not the same. They're not even close. And you know what? I'm actually inclined to agree with him because John Morton's better. John Morton is better because I'm going to tell you this right now. You want to talk about a sycophant for Ben Johnson? This guy is near the top of the list because he was just going on and on about, Ben Johnson, this great creative player, this great innovative mind. Oh, he did this. Oh, he's done that. All right, pump the damn brakes and time the hell out here, dude. Let's back up here for just half a damn second. Because let's think about this. Everybody, ever since Ben Johnson came onto the scene, has wanted to talk about him like he is just this innovative thinker, this creative guru when it comes to offensive play design and also offensive play calling. And while to a certain extent, I will agree with that, there is a problem with this. Trying to say that he's this all-knowing guru is just simply not the case. Again, let's remember how Ben Johnson came into this situation. He came out of the blue. And again, remember, this is a guy who nearly gave up on coaching football because nobody would hire him. He literally had an interview where he said he was on his house sitting on the couch thinking he was about to give up on coaching because nobody was hiring him. It wasn't until Matt Patricia hired him to be the tight ends coach that he actually got back into the whole thing. And then it wasn't until, obviously, Dan Campbell decided to make him the passing game coordinator when, he took over play calling duties from, Anthony Lynn and then got promoted to the offensive coordinator. So it's not like this guy just was, oh my God, this great mental, creative, innovative mind that the Lions just happened to find out of the blue. This is a guy that nearly gave up on coaching because nobody was hiring him. And then let's think about this as well. If you take a look at Ben Johnson's background, where he came from, who he's worked under, he's not worked under anybody that's of significant noteworthiness except for Dan Campbell. Prior to that, no big names, no big innovative thinkers or creative minds or offensive gurus. Nobody. Nobody of noteworthiness. And yet everybody wants to attribute that somehow he's the reason that the Lions offense became this juggernaut. Let's understand something here. That's not at all how the history books were written. Go back to the 2022 season. Dan Campbell had specifically stated that the offense was a three-way project that was made by John Morton, Jared Goff, and also by Ben Johnson. So let's think about this here. That's 3 different people that are working together to put this offense into its place where it's at. So first and foremost, just from that perspective, Ben Johnson did not have the whole hand in building this offense. That's number one. And for anybody to think that he is, that is just childish and absolutely laughable thinking. Because I want you to answer me this question. Tell me how a guy with no background in play calling, a guy with no background in play design, out of nowhere, and with no training or mentoring from any top coach, all of a sudden becomes this offensive phenom. Explain that to me. That's never happened in the NFL. Every great NFL coach has always had some place where they started underneath somebody that, hey, you know what? You can attribute where they got that from. With Dan Campbell, it was under Sean Payton and Bill Parcells. With Bill Walsh, it was under what's his name? The guy that Paul Brown. So again, there are guys that have got their attributes, their understanding of football from other people. Ben Johnson doesn't have that. Ben Johnson does not have somebody that he was underneath prior to coming to Detroit where you could say, oh yeah, that's where he got that from. But yet when we're talking about John Morton, this is a guy that's worked underneath John Gruden, Sean Payton, and Jim Harbaugh. And somehow that doesn't qualify him. Somehow that doesn't put him in the position to say, oh, you know what? John Morton is a better play caller, a better play designer because of all the years of experience, double of which, he has over Ben Johnson. You want to really seriously try to tell me that somehow that doesn't qualify. Again, that's what I call diarrhea of the mouth and constipation of the brain. There's just absolutely nothing of intelligence there. And furthermore, let's go on with John Morton here. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that John Morton has worked with guys like, Drew Brees. He's worked with guys like Bo Nix. I mean, hell, last year, Bo Nix was one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. In fact, I would say he was the second best young quarterback in the league last year behind Jaden Daniels. This is a guy that worked directly with him because he was the passing game coordinator, who, again, worked directly with Sean Payton, who he's worked with numbers of times. And yet, again, Adam Kaplan, when all he talks about with John Morton in that freaking 15 minute segment is he wants to talk about his his previous lone offensive coordinator experience in the NFL when he was with the Jets in 2017. And he wants to say that, the players didn't buy in, the players didn't like him because he was trying to force the Sean Payton method on him. I'll be like, wait a minute here. Let's go back to that season, shall we? Yeah. The offense didn't do very well compared to everybody else in the league. But yet, if you go back to that season, Josh McCown, Bilal Powell, Robbie Anderson or Robbie Chosen as he now goes by, a number of offensive players in that offense had career years under John Morton's offense. So yeah, while the offense as a whole and comparatively to the rest of the NFL didn't do that great, for the players that actually performed in it, which was a bunch of hodgepodge cast-off players that was literally just thrown together, they had some of their best work. That was their best season for a lot of them. So you want to try and tell me that for an offense that was put together with all these hodgepodge cast-off players, that somehow you expected John Morton to have this just juggernaut of an offense. To me, that is about trying to say that, hey, John Morton should have had an offense in 2017 that was absolutely great. But yet, you know what you're giving him? You're giving him an offense that in essence has rubber nails. And let me tell you something. We all know how effective rubber nails are. They're not very effective at all. And yet, despite that, like I said, those players, in most cases, posted career numbers. The best numbers of their careers. Again, I look at what Adam Kaplan had to say just about, both Kelvin, Shepard, and also John Morton, and I feel like this is a guy that has to walk around with a plant that has to constantly make oxygen because of the waste of oxygen he has whenever he opens his mouth. Because the guy is literally talking about nonsense. But again, that's only part of what this dude decided to speak about. Because then the further part that we have to talk about is how Adam Caplan then went further on to state that Johnson rebuilt Jared Goff. And again, not only is this easily disproven, but again, I'm sorry, the intelligence that Kaplan expresses here is bizarre. He's showing that he couldn't pour water out of a bucket if the instructions were on the bottom. Because let's understand something here. Ben Johnson was not the one that was out on the field actually performing. All Johnson did was call the damn plays. But here's the one thing. We sometimes know Jared Goff didn't run the plays that Ben Johnson called because Jared Goff would check plays, he would kill plays, he would go to different plays. I mean, how many times did we hear that Jared Goff could literally go up to the offensive line and he'd have 3 or 4 plays that he could check out of? So right then and there, that already disproves that point. And then on top of that, Jared Goff had more control over the offensive play execution than anybody else because, again, he's the quarterback. He's the guy that's on the field seeing everything that's going on. He can make decisions that, Ben Johnson can't. And again, let's further understand something here. Brad Holmes has stated on numerous occasions that Goff has always been a great quarterback. And so, again, Brad Holmes is a guy that understands talent, understands how to evaluate it, knows what to look for, and again, has a better grasp of player eval and player progression and development than Ben Johnson does. So that defies the idea of somehow Ben Johnson rebuilt Jared Goff. And then let's consider this. Jared Goff's production over the last couple of years has not been only consistent, but it has gotten better every single year. That can't all be from coaching. Because again, this is a guy that was drafted first overall in 2016. This is a guy that has helped rebuild 3 different programs through both college and NFL ranks. And on top of that, if you just take a look at the production, like I said, a lot of that speaks more to Jared Goff's progression and development as a player from the talent that he already has, which he has plenty of. I mean, for crying out loud, you go back to the games last year against the Seahawks, the Bills, the Jaguars, the 49ers, the Titans. Jared Goff was absolutely killing these teams. It was like he was playing Madden on rookie level. And again, I've said this before, I'll say it again now. But if you go back to 2024, Jared Goff's stats, I mean, he was second in the NFL in completion percentage with 72.4%. Second in the NFL in passing yards, 4,629. Second in pass average per throw, 8.6. Fourth in passing touchdowns, 37. Third in pass touchdown percentage per throw, 6.9. Second in passer rating with 111.8. And sixth in QBR and 68.4. This is a guy that was playing at a top 3 level. That's not all from coaching. Coaching will get you some part of the way. But for a quarterback to play like that, that's not just coaching. I'm sorry. Anybody that wants to argue with me, I will argue with you until the end of time because it's not all coaching. Coaching is important, don't get me wrong, but the player has to make it work out on the field. They have to read the defense, they have to make the plays, they have to be able to work on the fly, they have to be able to, do all these different things. And again, if you go back to 2024, out of all 17 games that the Lions played last year, in the regular season, Jared Goff only had 5 games that were sub 100 passer ratings. That type of consistency, again, is not from coaching. That is from a player doing their job and getting consistently better over time. Because again, if you take a look at Jared Goff's stats since 2022, he's 4th in the NFL in completion percentage with 68.1%. Number 1 in the NFL with passing yards with 13,642. 4th in the NFL in pass average with 7.9 on average a pass. First in passing touchdowns, 96. Tied 6th in pass touchdown percentage per throw with 5.5. Tied 5th in interception percentage per throw with a 1.8. And 3rd best in the NFL with 102.7 passer rating. So, why am I bringing that up? The reason why I'm bringing it up is because it's relevant to the conversation. Because to say that Johnson rebuilt Goff, it makes no sense due to a couple of factors. Number 1, as I stated, it would be one thing if Johnson had the experience like a Sean Payton or an Andy Reid or even a Mike Martz from going way back in the day. And somehow to have that experience to then match with the offensive knowledge that supposedly Ben Johnson has. But Johnson doesn't have either of those. He didn't have either of those when he met with Jared Goff. So how exactly could Ben Johnson rebuild something when he didn't even have the tools or knowledge to know what exactly to repair? Because here's the thing, if you're going to say someone rebuilt or repaired something, okay, that would tell me you already have done this before. That would tell me you already have the knowledge to do that. But yet, Ben Johnson never did that. So how could he know what to repair? What tools could he use to repair Jared Goff with if he's never done it before? Who's he done it with? Second, how could Johnson be credited for Goff's production when Johnson, as I said, has had no background or prior evidence to show for it and, to say that it was more him than Jared Goff? Again, I don't recall Ben Johnson ever being a play caller elsewhere. I don't recall Ben Johnson ever creating an offense somewhere else and then, getting cast off and coming to Detroit and then rebuilding himself there. That never happened. So how can you say for 100% certain that it was more about him and not about Jared Goff? Or more about him and maybe not as much Jared Goff, but also all the players that were on that offense? To say it was more about Ben Johnson is just absolutely laughable. The types of players that we have, Goff, Gibbs, Monty, Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, J-Mo, Tim Patrick, all of those guys are more of an important factor as to why this offense has performed the way it has than supposedly Ben Johnson's, just absolutely ingenious ability to, design and call plays. Because again, we've seen what Ben Johnson does with his play calls. Yeah, he can be creative, but also there are some times where he makes some really doozy play decisions. And we as Lions fans have seen that happen on quite more than one occasion. Lest we forget about the Jamison Williams interception in the division game. And then third, if Ben Johnson was the mastermind, then please tell me why, as far as rebuilding Goff, why Morton, Johnson, and Campbell all have stated that the offense is primarily centered around what the quarterback likes. I ask this because Campbell has stated that Goff is the leader of the offense. He stated that unequivocally. And even Johnson stated that Goff had control and ability to command the offense with audibles, checks, kills. He even had the ability to check offensive line protections. So those things right there are things that most quarterbacks don't have the ability to do. Most quarterbacks don't have that kind of control. They don't have that kind of authority to make those changes. Very few quarterbacks have that, at least to the extent that Jared Goff has. And then finally, both John Morton and Campbell have repeatedly stated that Goff has been wanting and is pushing for more and more ownership and control of the offense. He wants to have more of the offense. He wants to have more control, more ownership of the offense. So considering the amount of control that Jared Goff already had or has, let me ask this question. Based upon how they're stating that phrase, it would seem to me that Johnson held Goff back and more in check rather than building him up. Just saying it for what it is. And then, let's finish this off here. Because again, the whole point of the conversation with the podcast was whether or not the Lions could be better than the Philadelphia Eagles, or if they could match the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, Kaplan then stated that the Lions, in his opinion, are a 10-11 win team this year, and that they are not going to be able to go to the Super Bowl. Which again proves to me that you can indeed evolve backwards. Because not only is Kaplan unequivocally wrong that the Lions can't go to a Super Bowl, but to think that the Lions can only win 11 games, I think is a bit short-sighted. Because I find that yet again, this is a case of if he ever had a clever thought, it probably died alone and afraid. Because let's consider two abundantly clear facts about this. Number one, talent-wise, this team overall, the 2025 Lions, are significantly more talented overall as a team than what we were in 2023 when the Lions were literally a whisker away from going to a Super Bowl. Now, last year, we aren't as talented as where we were because, okay, yeah, we don't have Frank Ragnow. We don't have Kevin Zeitler. Zadarius Smith has not come back, at least yet. So, yeah, while we're not as talented, we're still pretty damn talented. And we still can win a Super Bowl. Just because we're missing those three players, of which we can still bring one back, that does not mean we can't win a Super Bowl. Because remember something. This is a team that with a wounded defense, and I do mean that, wounded defense, we went 15-2 with the best offense in football and had the best record not only in franchise history, but we were tied for the best record in all of football last year. So simply put, that defense, the fact that we're going to have a better defense this year because, well, one, our health is going to be better, but also the fact that all the players that we had last year, they're going to grow, they're going to be developed further from where they were last year. Because that seems to be something that Kaplan completely overlooked, at how somehow growth and development doesn't factor into all this at all. And then again, even with Frank Ragnow gone and even with Kevin Zeitler not here anymore, we still have a top talented offense. Again, there was a report that just came out from a top NFL scouting person that still believes the Lions have a top 5 offensive line. I'm willing to go with a top NFL scout who understands how to evaluate players more than a guy who apparently doesn't know how to put his ass from a tea kettle. So I'm going to say this. Our offense is still the best offense in the league until proven otherwise. And our defense, as we already know, even last year with half of it on freaking IR, was a top 10 defense. So with us getting back that health, that's going to propel us even further. So again, that to me is a huge portion of this. And again, just to kind of wrap this all up, Kaplan, again, wanted to talk about the offensive line. Obviously with Ragnow being retired, Zeitler being gone. And again, somehow that, once was a strength is now a weakness. Well, let me put something out here for you. That offensive line that he wants to now call a weakness because we're missing a whole bunch of stuff supposedly in the middle. Let's go back to 2021. Ragnow only played 4 games in 2021. Decker also missed 8 games in that year. Big V, that's a name most of us haven't recalled in a while. He also was in and out of the lineup. There was a ton of offensive line rotations in that season. Yet, according to PFF, at the end of the year, the Lions' offensive line was still the 13th best that year. Now, let's consider something here. Tate Ratledge is going to be a better right guard than Big V ever was. Glasgow is a better center replacement than Evan Brown was when, Ragnow went down with injury. And Mahogany is going to be a likely better, better second-year person than Jonah Jackson was in 2021. Especially considering how well Mahogany did in spot duty for Zeitler last year. And Decker and Sewell, they'll continue to hold down the bookends at the fort. And, that will ensure that the Lions' offensive line is, again, still a strength in 2025. And, again, top offensive scout, top O-line scout literally just came out and said that our offensive line is still considered a top 5 offensive line. So, when you take a look at everything that Kaplan decided to open his mouth and spew crap out of, quite literally, it shows that, the wheel upstairs is spinning, but the hamster died long ago. Just absolutely just an embarrassment of a freaking podcast to open his mouth into. Now, again, I'm not saying anything negative about the podcast, but the person they brought on, quite clearly, for an NFL analyst, does not know ball. Just going to say that for what it is. But anyway, folks, I've said my piece. I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. But I also want to encourage y'all, please subscribe to the channel. If you like what you saw, I also want to encourage y'all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon. Hope everyone has something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. Hope this episode was educational to you. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And with that, until the next time we meet, I just want to say thank you all for watching. God bless, and go Lions.